Good evening and welcome to the Standing Committee on Finance and Operations. I want to thank everyone for being flexible this evening and switching what was supposed to be at least a partially in-person meeting to a fully remote meeting. I do want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. That some of us have cats that apparently are a little excited about the snowstorm. Sorry about that. And also that because we're fully remote, all of the votes will be by roll call. We also don't have a clerk this evening. Dr. Friel is ill. So to the degree that we actually need to take any votes, I'll just be naming my colleagues and keeping track here. So I'm going to first call the meeting to order. Vice Chair Kamara?
Here.
Member Mailman?
Here.
And the chair is here. So the item we have on the agenda is our monthly update on transportation, which is GB 2-241, to consider monthly updates on the implementation of district operated transportation during the 2022-2023 school year. And I did just want to check to my colleagues, would it be useful for me to have the chart and so forth up on the screen for us to share, or do you feel comfortable just having it in front of you? What would you prefer?
I think, to the chair, I think for the public and for our own beautiful eyes, it'll be worthwhile as we discuss.
All right. So,
I like it.
Okie dokie. So let me just bring that up on the screen. Oh, wait, hang on. Let me just switch what window I opened. There we go. All right. And with that, I think we'll just mute ourselves and turn it over to you, Mr.
Allen. Thank you, Chair O'Connell-Novick. So this is our January update for transportation, both in terms of staffing and vehicles. And then certainly we can answer any questions you have related to our transportation self-operated operation that you may have. If you recall, when we started the school year, we had about as many drivers as we were running routes, which also included, we were running the full number of routes, but we were using 74 big bus routes and 89 mid-size routes and double tripping. As of today, we now have 23 drivers more than the current number of routes that we are running. As you can see, 12 big full-size bus drivers and 11 mid-size drivers. If you could just for a second scroll down to the color chart. And even since last month, you can see that we've added 6 additional drivers than last month. Our plan and our goal for the time we meet next month is to meet or exceed that green line by having enough drivers to meet the planned number of routes, the target. We didn't expect we're going to reach the total driver target. That would include sufficient number of spares this school year. That's kind of has been a stretch goal, but that's something we're working towards. But what we want to be able to do is actually have enough drivers by the springtime where we can return to running all of our regular routes, the 101 full-size routes and 95 mid-size routes. Now, there's a lot of work that still needs to occur between now and then. We have 48 drivers, which is just right above this chart, 48 drivers in training. So the 13 drivers that are permitted are the first set of drivers that we're looking to bring on to exceed that planned number of route driver target of 196, and then the additional 35 of the upcoming months. Of course, there's a lot of work involved with the training of our bus drivers, from classroom time, road time, and then actually passing the vehicle the driver test through the state police. So we continue to make progress, as the color chart shows, towards our target, due to both primarily based on current ridership. We have ended some double chip routes, and our goal is by this year is to eliminate as many, if not all, of the double trip routes this year. And then going into the summertime, continue to train additional drivers to reach that red line, which is our total driver target. So that's kind of our plan for the next 6 months going into next school year. So with that, I'm going to just maybe pause and see if there's any question with regards, just since we're doing this with a screen shared, see if there's any questions that the committee may have with regards to drivers.
All right, in terms of drivers, Member Mailman and Vice Chair Kamara, do you mind just please muting when you're not talking, just because I'm getting feedback? Thank you. Member Mailman.
It seems, you know, I don't know if the lines actually show it this way, but it seems, Brian, like there's more through the chair access to people. Are you seeing a difference in applications, or does it feel like there's more people available coming to take a look at the jobs?
Mr. Allen?
Through the chair, I'll defer to either John or Mike, because they're, you know, the ones actually doing this on a day-to-day basis. So either John or Mike, if you can answer that question.
I can jump in that right now. We have a number of folks ready to be tested shortly, but the next important thing for us to do is to get folks who are interested, who have been studying, to pass the permit tests. There are 4 separate permits that they need to have, and until they pass those, we cannot start counting the 60 hours of pre-service training that are necessary before the road test. So that's where we are with a number of candidates. I don't have the exact number of that. Mike, do you have that?
Mr. Freeman?
Sorry, just trying to unmute myself. The number that we have in train and trying to pass is the 35 currently that we're working on. But to add to John and answer Brian's question too about more access to individuals to train, it is actually starting to get a little bit harder, as in previous reports we've had almost 80 individuals training to get permits. We have a very large turnover in trying to get people to pass the permits. Right now, we're about a 50% ratio to if you actually start our program and will end up licensed. So to keep that pool going, we're still trying to do some recruitment and trying to recruit people into the training program.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, John.
Any questions on drivers, Vice Chair Kamara?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the information. You may have hinted this, but I want to know, were there any difference in process? It could be any kind of process with regard to getting notices out to people. But were there any differences in terms of attracting people, which has resulted to like at least 6 additional?
Mr. Allen, Mr. Freeman?
Through the chair, so the 6 additional were people that were coming through our training program, and we're really trying to accelerate the number of people we can get through the training program. As you recall, the school committee recently approved additional training staff to allow us to get more people their hours needed to be licensed. So we continue to partner with Mass Hire. We continue to use word of mouth. We had the open house back in August that was very successful. And through School Spring and other means, we continue to receive applications. But as Michael just said, we've really kind of exhausted many of those avenues at this point. And so as we go into the spring and summertime, we'll revisit each of those Mass Hires, another open house, and so forth, to see if we can get sufficient number of candidates to get us up to our total target going into next school year or through next school year.
Thank you.
Anything further, Vice Chair Kamara, on drivers?
No, I think my other addition was what Brian, his last sentence, in terms of like, looking for other ways in which we can attract people to our district for this specific purpose, for driver's purpose. Thank you.
Yeah, I had the same question. In terms of, it feels as if getting from the green line to the red line might end up being the biggest challenge yet. The only other question you mentioned, Mr. Allen, where I was actually going to go next, which was that we had the conversation and approved the additional positions we're phasing in the 7D, I imagine. Where can I just ask where we're at in terms of that hiring process and whether or not we have people who are in train in the building or anything like that?
Certainly, I'll have Mr. Freeman give an update on each of those positions.
For the safety training liaison, it has been posted to School Springs. We completed their interviews. We did extend a job offer to an individual. We're hoping to have him start by next Monday, so that position should be filled. The operations supervisor position for the 7D, we're currently pulling the applications. We've had a total, I think 14 individuals apply. So we're going through those and we'll be setting up the interviews this week. And then we also posted for the router position, and we're currently going through the interviews for that position.
And then the other question I had was the 50% pass rate for drivers. Do we have any sense as to whether that's typical? I assume that this is something that you all are really pushing on, because obviously there's sort of an investment of time in people to get them to the place where they're actually even taking the permit. Do we have any sense as to kind of, is that something where with further training, we've managed to sort of close loops? How does that end up working?
Through the chair, we have tried to switch up a couple different methods. I've asked around to different districts and no one else seems to be doing the training that we have. As far as the recruitment through the mass hires, individuals that just have no experience with transportation at all. So it is a unique situation. We've switched with our next mass hire class. We're actually going to change the program a little bit to see if we can get more people to be able to pass the permanent test. It seems like once we can get them to pass the permitted test, we have a better success rate of getting them to actually get licensed. But it's that initial of actually get them to commit, take the test, and pass all 4 tests. So we do keep trying to switch it up. We have been running night classes. We actually have one running this week for the 35 individuals that haven't passed yet, just to try to give them that extra study time and to help them. We've been setting up the tests for them to try to give them a little bit more pressure on trying to go down to take the test instead of relying on them. So we keep trying different methods. We haven't found anything really that's too successful yet.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, and as always, if there's something where you feel like there's something that we could do that would be useful or helpful, please be sure and let us know, because that's obviously in everyone's best interest to further that. Mr. Allen, I'll scroll up then if you want to talk about buses.
Thank you. So to the chair, actually, since this was written last week, I think, Mr. Freeman corrects me otherwise, we now have 99 of our new buses on property, still working through the registration and license process to get them all on the road. But for all intents and purposes, less one bus. We now have all of our full-size buses. We have a meeting, I think it's this week, Wednesday, with regards to determining the status of where our mid-sized bus, when they will begin construction and when we could expect to see delivery. So obviously we'll have an update for the committee at the next month's meeting. So with regards to vehicles, full-size buses essentially complete. We'll have an update for mid-sized buses next month. Fueling station, which will be on Pullman Street, is nearing completion. So by the time we meet next month, the fueling station will either be operational or nearly operational. So we're really making the final steps in many regards of where we were expected to be. maybe a little later than we had hoped with vehicles and fueling and so forth, but we are getting there, making great progress. So don't see really any obstacles with regards to our full-size buses or fueling stations. We'll have more information on mid-size buses. And as you can see in our narrative, we've recently, a week or so ago, reduced the number of double trip buses. And so, change is, sometimes hard, even when you go moving in the right direction. So a couple of hiccups with regards to the new times and buses, but I think by now that's all been smoothed out. And so our intent is to continue to reduce the number of double trips throughout the spring, making buses available for athletics after the high school first tier come the spring season and so forth. So we're moving in the right direction to where we want to be. Optimistic we can get there over the next couple of months.
Very good. Okay. Any questions from my colleagues on the vehicle end or the other sort of next steps and open-ended things? Vice Chair Kamara?
Thank you. I guess my only, I think this is obviously information is wonderful. My only question is, but it's kind of more like educating myself as I'm thinking out loud in my mind. So it seems as if double trip bus routes was something that is perhaps not optimal, but we had it because we had lesser drivers, and now that we're increasing our drivers, we're now going into a more optimal scheduling with just having one-to-one bus route ratio. Is that what?
Through the chair, that's entirely correct. Yes. So we've been running double trips for the last year and a half with the goal to get sufficient number of drivers where we can, as you say, running one-to-one to routes, driver to route. Our goal is to be there by the end of this year.
Vice Chair Kamara?
Thank you. Thank you.
And Member Mailman, any questions on vehicles or the other pieces of outstanding work here?
All set. Sorry.
I was going to say, if you're shaking your head, you're not on my screen. I just had to scroll down. Very good. So I had a couple of questions, Mr. Allen. In terms of the double trips, it clearly that's something that we're sort of phasing in over time. The first thing that I just wanted to make sure that I understood correctly is that has necessitated in some cases students who didn't have double trips having to switch which makes sense in terms of, we're rejiggering how people are working and where the buses are going and how many students we have on them. I guess I wondered is if that is something that has happened to your student already, is that something that could potentially happen again as we continue the sort of undoubling process as we go forward?
Through the chair, I'll defer to Mr. Hennessy or Mr. Freeman on that.
To the chair, yes, it is possible. We are trying to minimize that wherever we can. But as you had appropriately described, it all depends on how many students, where they're going, how long does the trip take, and what time is the vehicle available for its next trip, how long is that going to be, things of that nature. So yes, it is possible for that to happen, but we're very much aware that every change we make affects students, family, and staff. So we try to minimize the impact of that.
So I guess one message, as Mr. Freeman's familiar with, I had some panicked messaging back and forth with him from a parent who had never actually had the bus information in the student portal, had never actually had the bus app work, and suddenly was trying to figure out over a weekend whether or not there was any change. So the message to families is that if you don't have that information if you're not seeing your bus number in the student or family portal, get in touch with the school to figure that out so that when we make these changes over a weekend, you actually can see the shift happen. Is that a good thing for us to be emphasizing, perhaps?
Yes.
Okay. And do we have any sense, or really effectively, it's entirely going to depend on how the onboarding and the continued passage rate of bus drivers go in terms of the evolution of this?
Yes, that is accurate. It will be incremental. And it depends on how quickly these folks make it through.
Okay. So I had sort of two questions that are less about maybe current status and more about both process and moving forward. One is something that was brought to my attention towards the end of last week, which is that we had our indoor track teams had a meet in, are we okay, by the way, in terms of the screen sharing to my colleagues? Okay. So we had a meet in Boston for our indoor track teams that necessitated them needing to be there for 4 p.m. on Friday. And the school committee is well aware that we really can't get anywhere at 4 p.m. right now at all. So completely understanding that and realizing that that's part of the ongoing process here. My question, I guess, is when we run into that, what exactly is the step that then gets kicked off? So we have a regular process of, the sports schedule goes in, the transportation department makes the arrangements. If the answer back from the transportation department is we can't do that, where does that go, and how does that get handled? Because there clearly were a number of things that did happen. The students ended up being told themselves that they couldn't go, which may or may not have actually been an accurate message. But I just want to make sure that I have an understanding as to sort of I know that the inclination of the administration is not to be telling students that they can't attend, but I guess my question is what happens instead? To the extent that we know that.
To the chair, I'll start, and then I'll let Mr. Hennessy, Mr. Freeman jump in. But generally, if we cannot provide the transportation, we would first ask whoever, athletic director, otherwise, to check with another bus company to see if they have a vehicle available. If that turns out not to be an option, we have, with other incidents, done an early release to get the athletes to their place, so the bus can be back for a first tier stop. We did that a number of times, as I think everybody knows, during the fall season. So those are really the options that are available to the transportation department that we give as options to the athletic department or to whatever other team. Or so I'll defer to Mr. Hennessy and Mr. Freeman if there's any other enhancements to that.
No, that's accurate. That covers it.
Okay. So then I guess here's my additional question, and this obviously wouldn't work for everything. In this particular case, it would have. I know that we sort of within our transportation budget traditionally have had bus passes through the RTA. We don't need those right now because of the buses being free. Do we ever look at other methods of public transit? So in this particular case for indoor track, those meets are at the Reggie Lewis Center. They're on the Orange Line. It's a super easy commuter rail back bay Orange Line. Do we ever try anything like that?
To the chair, I'm not sure that we have, but presuming that there's an opportunity to easily purchase MBTA passes, it's not something that should be too difficult for us to access.
And I'm sort of internally going through our policies to figure out whether or not we would need any kind of a policy change to do that. But since we make provision through the RTA, it would seem like there's whatever we have is probably already covering it. I guess I just wondered if we were somehow preventing that through having a policy that didn't actually provide for that. Then the other question I had was one, and I see that Vice Chair Johnson is on here because continuing to remember his question from budget last season, where we talked about the fact that we make provision for athletics, but we don't sort of assume provision for any other after school activities. And over the weekend I was at high school quiz show. South High had a team there, and they made their own provision to get there. And, we'll have theater competitions coming up, and we'll have, the robotics team is competing. And so I don't know that we're in a place, and I'm assuming probably because of staffing, we're not, although it may depend on when it is, if we can try to evolve in that direction already this year, if that's something that administration is planning to propose for the coming year. I guess I was looking for what reflections you all might have in terms of, can we start to move in that direction? Is that something that we need to wait to do? Where are we at with that?
The chair. So we've made some announcements, and we just probably need to do a much better job in terms of communicating to schools. We have said any student related activity, that's not like a student activity account, but it's a school sponsored event, that we would provide transportation at no cost to that group. And so we've done that on a number of occasions. Again, same limitations we have to any of the athletic teams being, as of right now, the buses would be available on school days after about around 4 o'clock or later, or anytime during the weekends or holidays. And so we've done that on a number of occasions. So again, maybe we need to keep reinforcing that option to schools. We've been trying to capture the number of incidents so we can properly budget for that going into FY24, because we still would have driver and fuel expenses to capture, but not necessarily to be charged to the groups. It would be absorbed by the district budget. And so we'll continue to work on that. Likely we'll just come up with an estimate to put into the FY24 budget. Therefore, funds are available for these other student groups to access transportation. Hopefully by next year, we'll have plenty of drivers available to do it even outside of the hours I had just listed.
Well, that's marvelous. I'm glad to hear that. I'm not going to ask formally for a report, but I would love to hear more about sort of how that's working, because that's definitely, first of all, it's better than I hoped, but it's also showing a level of flexibility that I think was exactly what we were hoping in terms of bringing transportation in-house, of responding to actual need rather than just saying, we're here to drive the kids to school and here to drive the kids home, and that's really all that we do. But I mean, just first of all, my compliments, because that's really good to hear. Is there anything that we need to either know or do in terms of that from the school committee perspective?
No, to the chair, I think the school committee's desire and directive was very clear. And again, maybe we just need to keep reinforcing that to schools to know that's an option for them.
Mm-hmm. So good question, Member Johnson. see the change you already made. That's great. Okay, so any other questions from my colleagues related to anything? Vice Chair Kamara, it looks like your hand is up.
Thank you to the chair and to the administration, Transportation Department. Thank you guys for being here. And I do want to say that part of your questions also hinted some of the things that I had as a follow-up, and with regards to like sports and then any after school supports. But my question, Brian, was kind of just for a knowledge thing, and also maybe for anyone else looking at this meeting. For the one-to-one bus routes, that we have going for until, okay, so is the one-to-one just does that also take into account the supports from after school sports and also like after school supports, which I think from Tracy's comment, I think I wasn't too sure of the response, but I just wanted to know, like, all of the trips that we have one-on-one for, does that include like after school sports and after school supports, as well as trips that occur like between the hours of our educational operation?
Mr. Allen?
Yes, so to the chair and to everybody really. So in terms of after school sports, we are limited to 4 p.m. or later, but we are doing things like innovation pathways in early college because we've built that tier, those times around our regular tier structure. And then in terms of after school supports, it's the same time frame, it's 4 o'clock or later, or if it's 2 after school providers, as we've said, as we've always said, if we have a bus going in the direction from a school to an after school provider and there's capacity on that bus, then the child is more than welcome to ride the bus to get off close to that after school provider. as we build the number of, actually, if you look at the, the first page, we have more drivers than we're running routes. However, because of the season we're in or whatever, we're using all of those on a daily basis for spare drivers to cover absences. So we're not in a point yet to release or increase the number of routes yet, because we're using those driving positions primarily for data coverage of daily absences. Once we get more drivers on board, that does give us a lot more flexibility and options available for athletes, for other student clubs, for after school programs and remediation programs, and so on and so forth. Once we're running the planned number of routes, that will give us greater number of flexibility to support students after school.
Thank you. So from kind of what I'm hearing from you is kind of like half and half, right? That my answer is like not holistically, but we're not completely there yet, and we are getting there. Okay, and then I think that also follows my other question, because if you remember at our early FNO meeting, we're in a new year now, later in the 2020 year, I think I had asked some questions about like transportation for certain, I think it was for winter sports, and now we are, I think we're still in January. January, almost done for this month. And you did mention that as we increase drivers and we'll see that that more supports will be geared towards. So that kind of falls into my previous question, which you kind of hinted on, right?
If through the chair, the number of drivers we need for after school during the winter sports season is much less than the demand during fall and spring season. And so you're exactly right. My comments about really aggressively trying to get the number of drivers over the bar here between now and April 1st is really intended to make the commitment that we've made for athletics to have 11 vehicles for athletics at that second tier time around 2:15, 2:30 every day. And so that's what we're really working towards, getting the number of drivers on board, and then decrease the number of double trips and have buses available for athletics. And as we continue to grow, then we have even greater options and opportunities for services for students.
Thank you so much. I just have one final question. As we look at our bus routes, and I'm asking this question because I attended my Grafton Hill Neighborhood Association meeting, and so folks at that Neighborhood Association meeting had mentioned that. So my question is, had mentioned that perhaps there are certain like sites that we may need to look at with regards to like where the sites are, and the person was supposed to also email this information to Councilman Russell, and then also include me into that. And I was going to forward it to you so that I can share that with you. But I'm still waiting for that email to come to me, because they were going to send me like the exact locations to where they were talking about, that perhaps like those locations are not so like safe for picking up students. And my question was like, when we're thinking about routes, just like ideally, do we like think about like, do we put like, okay, so like access, not access, but do we put like, if this location may not be so conducive for support and for protection of students, do we then find a next conducive route within the same area? Or like, what do we do? I just holistically, like, what do we do in terms of like, how do we determine like routes and so forth?
Mr. Allen?
To the chair, so we've always done that, but really the new safety training liaisons, that is a critical component of their job as they move away from training people and they actually get into what their role is after we're training all these employees, is exactly that. They're safety liaisons. So they would go out and evaluate bus stop locations to make sure that they're appropriate for schools. They're going to be doing a whole host of other things, but that is a critical component of what our safety training liaisons would be doing, is to evaluate bus stop locations.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Any other questions? Member Mailman, anything else that has come up for you? All right. I do just want to note, by the way, to our administrators that while I realize that we're all trapped in our houses, I also don't think that there's any greater testimony to the amount of interest and support you have from the Worcester School Committee that you have the entire Worcester School Committee, save the mayor, on this meeting right now. all three of my colleagues who are not on finance and operations are also still on this meeting. So in case you ever, wonder in the middle of the night whether or not we care and whether or not we're behind you, we absolutely are, for all the way across the board here. And thank you to my colleagues, by the way, for both your interest and your ongoing support in this, because I know that it's a shared one.
To the chair, no, and we recognize that, and I do see all the other members on the Zoom. I'm not sure if they were waiting for like a snow call decision for tomorrow or not, but that won't be during this meeting. But the support of the school committee is very much appreciated in transportation. This is really an effort by all of us to provide better transportation services to our students at a lower cost. And so without the support of the school committee, this would not have been possible. So that is recognized and appreciated.
Great. So I think if we are set, then this is the motion here is to hold. So if I can just speak to my colleagues on that. So Vice Chair Kamara on the motion to hold.
Yes, thank you.
Member Mailman?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right. And on a motion to adjourn, Vice Chair Kamara?
Yes, thank you so much to everyone here.
And Member Mailman?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you all. Stay safe out there.